So, you want to change the world. Build something that makes people go, problem is, you'll be flying blind. You build product on one end, results come out the other, but in between is a massive black hole. And that's why we built Amplitude. It gives you a whole new understanding of customer behavior, predicts outcomes, and adapts experiences to drive world-changing results. You want to change the world? Now you can.
Thanks for tuning in to the Product-Led Festival. We really hope you're enjoying the festival so far, because we've got even more insights heading your way. All sessions are designed to be interactive and give you the chance to engage with our speakers, so come ready to get involved with your questions and comments. For all things product-led growth, don't forget to check out the Product-Led Alliance memberships at productledalliance.com. Sit back and enjoy the next session.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Product-Led Festival. It's been a fantastic day of insights and inspiration so far, and we've got a brilliant session up next right now on big bold bets versus incremental improvements. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Esther Porte, who is Senior Product Manager at MyFitnessPal. He'll be taking you through this session. But please do remember, drop any cues you have into the chat as well, and we'll endeavor to get to those at the end. But yeah, take it away, Esther. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Adam. Can you all hear me or see me? I guess probably hear me is most important here. Well, just let me know in the chat if there is any delay or anything. My first time using the platform, so I guess I won't be able to see you all, which is interesting, but I hope you can all hear me. If you don't, just ping me in the chat. Okay, let's get started. I will start to my screen. Okay. I think you should be seeing my screen right now. Again, if you do not, please ping me. I'm not sure who or how many people we do have right now. But Adam, thumbs up to get started right now, you think? Enough people have joined? Okay. I will take this for a yes. I hope people are seeing my screen right now. But let's get started. So I think before start off, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. I think I talked about 2 or 3 years ago at this same product festival on the product marketing side of the house, and very excited to be joining today. Talk more about product things. This is a topic that is close to my heart. Being a growth PM, I think these are two notions that I use and hear about a lot. So exciting to be diving a little bit more into these two. But first off, if I can, hopefully, yes, great. You should be seeing my next slide. Introduce myself a little bit. I know it's remote, it's weird, but to get to know you too, please also ping me some info in the chat. I'd love to connect afterwards. But this is me. I am Esther, was born and mainly raised in France, although I traveled a bit as a kid with my family. And this is my partner, Matt. And to start with the most upcoming things, I am welcoming a baby girl in 5 weeks. So if you see me stop, pause, and take my breath, catch my breath, I guess it's probably because I don't have much space left in my belly. So I just probably will have to pause sometimes to times. But everything's going well so far. During the pandemic, we lived in about 6 different Airbnbs, and this is my first week actually in my new apartment here in LA. So it is really empty, and that's why I have a fake background, because it's literally just a white wall. But we were in San Francisco for 7 years and then moved to Los Angeles. I'm also a yoga teacher, trainer at the same time. I did a training right before COVID hit. And in terms of career, so I started in San Francisco. I did a business school, master in business. I started in marketing analytics at Postmates and then moved into product when I joined Uber, where I stayed for 4 years. And I worked on, Uber has a lot of sub apps. So I worked on the driver app, I worked on the rider app. And then my last 2 years at Uber, I worked on something called Jump, which was a new vertical Uber had developed, and I'll talk about this throughout the presentation. So you'll hear me talk about that quite a bit. But this was 2-wheel electric vehicles, so think scooters, think bikes, or e-bikes, e-scooters rather. And I went from product marketing to growth PM. during that time. And then more recently, during the pandemic, I joined MyFitnessPal, which is a calorie and meal tracking app. And I'm a senior growth PM for them, specifically focused on anything subscriptions, which I'm really passionate about. Hi from friends all over the world. It's so great to see how diverse this crowd is. I love it. Okay, let's dive right in. So a couple of things I want to touch on today. One is definitions, and this is really my own definition of how I compare big bold bets versus incremental improvements. Obviously using different sources, but this is kind of how I've experienced those two notions and how I've come to differentiate those two. And then we'll touch on the why pursue big bold bets, the how to invest in those. And then I also want to touch on the limits and one ideal path, although there is no real ideal path, but one example of a company I've worked out and how they've navigated between those two notions. If there is anything else you want to know about it, please ping the chat. Always happy to add more to it, but I have a few slides, so I want to start here. Ping me. Obviously, if you have questions, I'll try to keep time at the end, but happy to answer things live if I see them during the chat. Hi. Definitions. Okay, so let's get a little bit interactive here via chat, if you don't mind. I'd love to take about a minute to just hear from you and how you with your own words, and maybe I'll just have to stop here because you already know everything about this, but how you do define big bold bets and or incremental improvement. So feel free to just ping the chat and you can just have, BBB dot a keyword or II, so you don't have to write the whole thing. I know it's a long word. And just ping me some ideas you have as far as, adjective or even definitions that you may have in mind so that I can understand where your heads are at in terms of understanding these two notions and how you differentiate those. So let's take maybe like a minute or less, and I will just read kind of through your answers here, if you don't mind. You can just use the chat for that. I'll mute myself for a sec while you do that. Don't be shy. Just have anything that comes to your mind before I kind of deliver my vision of it. I want to hear from you as well. Make it better. Great. Okay. Love that second one. Thank you so much. That sounds really all good. Wow, love it. Okay, I can just stop here. I feel like you know everything. Thanks for having me. I'm kidding. Okay, 10 more seconds, but I think I see a lot of great things, specifically on big bold bet, which is interesting. Typically, I feel like incremental improvement is something I've experienced more throughout my career. But I'll just share with you kind of a cloud of words. And I've seen a couple already written here, so very excited to see that you already have some knowledge there. But at a high level, right, I won't go into each of those notions, but I think you kind of get the idea. At a high level, so big bold bets, the semantic is really around risk and opportunity, right? So it is unproven, but it could become a game changer. While incremental improvement, the semantics here is really around speed and efficiency. So optimization typically, right? It's something that you can do pretty quickly and that will optimize or iterate on your product, an existing product. So the definition, if we have to keep one, this is not coming from BCG or any vetted organization. This is my own words and how I've come to think about all you see throughout this presentation, depending on the stage of company you are in, depending on the limits that each of these notions have. If I have to keep one definition for big bold bet, it would be, and I'll read through it. A big bold bet is a pursuit of a new and sizable opportunity that need a substantial investment of resources to be able to seize it. And I'll talk more in depth about how you size this investment. And not everyone has to go into a big bold bet, but how you can at least, say yeah or nay on that idea. While incremental improvement is the process of continuously learning from the market being, mainly your users or geographically where you're located in, and adjusting the existing product to facilitate its growth. Obviously, both ideas are different ways to grow your company. Simply, it's a little bit, the way to get there can differ a bit. So thank you for adding to the chat, super helpful, and I think you've kind of got the idea already. So what I want to kind of play now for 30 seconds is an example of my fitness pal story. It's a feature that was released in Q4, I think in Q4 last year or Q3. And for those who don't know, my fitness pal, so where I'm currently working at, it is a calorie and meal tracking app. And they're the leader in the health and fitness category currently in terms of revenue worldwide. This is an AI-powered scan to scan your food. So I'll play this video, just keeping in the back of your mind. At the end of this presentation, I will ask you if you think it's a big bold bet or an incremental improvement. So let's me play this, hoping it works. Alrighty, so hang tight for the answer. I will get back to it at the end of this presentation, but just want to hear from you if you think it's one or the other, based on what we will have hopefully learned together. In terms of why, right? So now I'll cover the why and the how, pursue big bold bets. Not that one is more important than the other, but I think I just want to talk about one of them and kind of compare it to the other notion. So in terms of why, this is not an exhaustive list. I'll start with this. I love how I see answers popping up. You're all very excited about this. Love it. I will kind of give the answer at the end. Just stick around. But in terms of the why, right? So there are different situations that can trigger the need to invest in a big bold bet. The three that I've experienced, I guess I've personally experienced the first one, but there are a couple of others. Is first of all, when growth slows down on one of your core products. So to give, again, the example, take the example of Uber. They started with a core product that was get a ride, right? So ride that became ride sharing. So share one ride with multiple people instead of being one person in one car with a driver. And then they started with the US, right? And when they achieved that leader position in ride sharing, they thought about what other vertical can we actually incorporate to still gain some growth in the market that we are on. And this is how Uber Eats got started. And I will talk about this a bit more in depth later in 2014, right? To keep growing, simply not necessarily focusing on the core product only. So that is one idea that can trigger the need to invest in big bold bet. Another one is if there's a disruptive technology that becomes available and can allow for product synergies. I think what is hard, and you'll see that in the limits later on, is to not lose your focus. So one good example I like to take is Alexa for Amazon. Obviously, Amazon is most of, what they're doing in their core product is delivery of goods. But when, voice recognition became a thing, they focused on hardware as well, and hardware just improved using voice recognition to launch Alexa. And the synergy obviously is pretty obvious. You can order on Amazon through Alexa. So that's another example when you can just still find synergy with your business, but invest in something new that becomes available in the market. And then last is when the company has the resources I mean by that financially and people-wise, to expand to new markets. So again, Uber started in Americas and then quickly expanded to other markets. So these are different position, different company stages where it would be interesting for you to think about a big bold bet. However, and this is segue to my next slide, is bets are risky, and so that should always be a really conscientious path. And I'll just walk you through the how. I think what are the things that you can just think and keep in mind and ask yourself and challenge your organization before actually making a decision to invest. In terms of when, right? So we'll talk about the how in a minute, but in terms of when should you invest in the big bold bets? Obviously, there are more than these two There are much more than these two type of company. You can be a startup, you can be a scale organization, you can be in between. They just wanted to separate into two kind of very clear buckets, because I'm sure some of you, and I don't know, and feel free to put in the chat as well, but I don't know if you are mainly in startups, all of you. I think I cannot see the full chat. It is kind of hidden. I can't see Eric's last message here, but I'd love to know if you are more working for a startup or for a scale organization, but I'm sure there could also be other situations here. But if you are on the startup stage, well, big disclaimer, probably everything you do is already a big ball bet mode, right? Because what I like to talk about, the kind of image I like to keep is you probably have the silver bullet mindset where everything you do is brand new, right? Because you don't have any historical data. You have to find your product market fit. This is the one thing that startups are really looking to find out. And once you get there, then once you get a pulse on, a pulse of the market and your product, then you start iterating incrementally. But the first thing you do is a big ball bet. So startup stage, you have to do a big ball bet. This is kind of this is probably, kind of the main thing that you are going to be doing for the next couple of months, if not years. If you are in a scaled organization, then probably you've experienced what I just discussed a minute ago around a growth that is slowly kind of slowing down. And so what you're trying to do here, and this is what Uber tried to do a couple of times, but also Amazon that we just talked about, you're trying to find doubling down on product that are not your product market fit necessarily, because iterating on those have not really given you the expected upside that you were looking for. So you have this growth target. You've been iterating on your product market fit product, but you're just not getting there yet. So what do? You're looking at other potential synergies, other technologies, other markets, etc. And this is a big ball bet. So you're trying to find a startup mindset all over again. And some companies are really good at that. Some are less so. And I'll get into the how to try to, if you're in that stage, try to do this in a successful manner. Any questions so far? How do you get a pulse on the market? Very good question, Michael. I'll get to that in actually a second. So good segue for my next slide. So the how. To me, there are two phases. So the first phase, and I want to make sure I'm keeping on time, but the first phase is what I call assessment of risk. And the goal really is to de-risk your decision process by analyzing. And so the first point, Michael, to your question is, how do I get market validation or a pulse on the market, you were saying? Well, I think every company has their ways of doing so. To me, there are two kind of categories to get a pulse: is quant and or qual, right? So market validation can be done by user survey, focus groups, sending, for instance, if I just give an example of how we did it for Jump at Uber, obviously bikes is not something that is brand new. Dockless bikes were, electric bikes were, but a lot of users, for instance, of Uber were already using City Bike in New York, which are dock bike. And so we went in these markets, interviewed users, understand what their pain point was, why they were using bike versus Uber. And that was how we got the pulse from the market. So talking to users, and I can't insist enough on how important that is. My advice on getting a pulse. The other way is looking at competitors, looking at market data. If you use app like App Annie, for instance, looking at how your competitors are trending, right? So for instance, in our world, competitors like Noom, Weight Watchers are definitely trending very positively. What they're doing differently that we could incorporate in our own app, that's another thing that, a BI team, for instance, a corp dev team, for instance, would help you do. So I hope that answers your question. Yep, testing, research, customer interviews, all of the above. The second step is, once you've identified if this is something your customer would be interested in, map this back to your existing team skill set. Meaning, again, Amazon probably had to hire a bunch of engineers working on voice recognition, right? And they probably did not have these engineers in-house. So understand where you have gaps in your organization to achieve these big ball bets. And then the third point, which is not the least at all, is looking at your cash flow, right? Do you have the investments? Do you have the necessary investments to actually execute on that big bold bet? And there are two things you need to look at. Is one, looking at the money you have in the bank, right? So working with your CFO on that, but also looking at the opportunity cost. So while you are working on this big bold bets, what are the other projects that you're putting, on the back burner? And that is something, we'll have to work with product teams on. So that was phase one. Phase two is the execution phase. So execution phase is once all of these different points, the assessment of risk is a yes, is a +1 for your organization. How do you actually execute on those bets? There are a couple of things that I think here is honestly very key from experience I've had, again, specifically at Uber, where they were doing a lot of big bold bets. One is you have to define the strategic way of investing in this bet. You can buy a company, you can partner with a company, or you can build it on your own, right? Amazon, they build their own Alexa. So they had to hire engineers that were able to build this new technology. Uber, we first partnered with Jump, and then we acquired Jump, and then we rebuild the app. So there are different ways of doing it. The second point, I think I talked about it already, so I'll go fast on that, but hire the profile that you are missing. Hire execs that are known to be successful with launching these big bold bets. And very important actually that I haven't put in here, but let me tell you, the offer you're making to them is also very important. They need to have this profile, need to have a pretty high variable bonus, right, based on the success of this big bold bet. So there need to be something that is really rewarding their risk, the risk that they are taking to join your company and launching something that has never been launched before. Then you need to identify your key metrics, understand exactly what does success means for your company for this big bold bet. It's like launching a company. You have to have metrics for your seed investment. And then once you get there, you need to look at the next step and understand what the metrics are for your Series A. This is the same thing. You have to treat this as you're launching a new company within your company. What are your different rounds of funding? And then last but not least, you also need to make sure these people are able to fly on their own, like break free from all of your legal processes, administrative processes, ops processes. And so a lot of company, like for instance Uber, again, sorry for taking the same example over again, but that's probably where my presentation idea came from, but they created separate legal entities for a lot of their bets. So Uber Eats is a separate legal entity, separate from Uber. Same for Google, right? Their autonomous car department is separate legally from the rest of Google, etc., etc. It will give your team more independence to achieve quickly. Okay, I think I'm almost getting to the end of my presentation, but limits for each of these notions. I feel like I've talked about it a little bit, but I want to insist again on what the limits are, because don't think this is an easy process. It is far from being one. But for big bold bet, I think you kind of probably guessed, but I would say rather than limits is what do you have to pay attention to when you are investing in either or. If you are investing in a big bold bet, make sure you're not lacking focus. Your customers are probably knowing you because of one product they love, because of one brand they love. And so you need to make sure you're still able to keep a tight marketing message. And if you're able to invest in a couple of big bold bets and still be successful, well, this is typically where you're able to tell a mega app kind of story that can later on brings you to great, not necessarily great achievements, but IPO, typically is a stage that company are aiming at when they are able to have a couple of successful big bold bets that are all linked together by one story. It is often more expensive than you would expect. And so make sure you also project your sales kind of projection typically will take more time than what you had initially in mind. So I have here delayed sales projection by 12 months at least. That's definitely extreme, but typically will take more time to see the return on investment that you would expect. For incremental improvement here, well, there are two main limits, right? One is lack of diversification. If you only do incremental improvements, then you may be missing out on, a new market change, or you may be missing out on a new technology that's coming out, or newcomers in your industry that are using breakthrough technology. So you have to always be aware, and maybe that's by working with your corp dev team or with your product teams, to always look at what's happening outside of your world to make sure you're not missing out on some very important innovations. Okay, so the little game we did initially, I think I saw a lot of answers already, but 10 more seconds maybe to put your answers in if you haven't. So for those who joined late, this is a little video of a feature that MyFitnessPal launched mid last year. And this is an AI powered scan. And so I was asking the team here if you think it's a big ball bet or an incremental improvement. And I'll give you 10 seconds and I'll just kind of show you the result of that test. Anyone has any idea? I can't scroll the chat, but oh, here we go. Okay. Giovanni is saying big ball bet, big ball bet. Okay. Well, you've all really understood this really right, which is exciting because I wouldn't do this whole presentation all over again. But yes, it's a big ball bet. So thank you for those who posted in here. It's a breakthrough technology, required a new skill set here, building an AI engineer team. It was expensive. It's a long-term investment to get results, and that really was a game changer. So these are all the recipe for a successful big ball bet. So yes, +1 to all of those who write that down. Thank you. Last but not least, I'll just show you really quickly one path, which is not necessarily the only path. I think as I'm writing it here, each company had their very own way to success. And, Uber obviously is a successful company that has its own way, across incremental improvement and big bets. MyFitnessPal as well. Everyone had their own way to reach success, and success doesn't mean the same for every company. So the example I'll give you is one ideal path, but in no means the single path, and your company should find their own path as well. But a little bit of history on Uber and how they managed to go from kind of one stage to the other. So in 2009, Uber Black was launched, and that was a really premium positioning. So you could get a ride at a pretty high price with really nice looking cars. Then in 2012, they moved to Uber X, which was a positioning change. So same product, same technology. So that's why I call this an incremental improvement. And they moved to making those rides a bit more affordable. Uber Pool is even further down, more affordable, where you're sharing a ride with someone. And this is still an incremental improvement, same tech. However, in 2014, that same year, when I mentioned earlier that growth was kind of slowing down, this is what was happening for Uber in the US. And so they tried a new vertical, which is delivering food from restaurant to your door. And that's definitely a big ball bet because the operation needed to do that was quite different. Jumping a couple of years later on, 2018, this is where, the team I worked on was very involved, but acquiring new ways of getting around using scooters and bikes, that also was a big ball bet. And then more recently, with the pandemic starting in 2020, Uber launched with Corner Shop something called Uber Grocery, and that was delivering not restaurants, but groceries to your door. And that I call this an incremental improvement because it is not highly different from Uber Eats. It's the same idea of moving food around, but using an opportunity, and here, pandemic, people not going to grocery shops anymore, to expand to a new vertical. So obviously more to come. And as you can see, this is not a very regular cycle. So depending on the opportunities that arise around you, you can grab whatever makes sense for you and move to a big ball bet or an incremental improvement or both, etc. So just to show you that there is no cyclic path to success, but just navigation based on what your company is kind of experiencing throughout the years. I believe that this is all I had. I have more in the appendix, but I want to make sure I leave you up for questions. I know it's a bit almost that time, but let me know if you have anything I can clarify. Hope that was helpful.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for that, Esther. Really brilliant presentation there. Fantastic insights. Really appreciate you taking us through that today. Yeah, I mean, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I know that we're pretty much to time. That was like perfect, dead on. But if we haven't got around to any questions today, please do feel free to connect with Esther directly on her LinkedIn. I've got the link in the chat as well there. You can also, of course, continue the conversation on our Slack community. I'll just drop a link in the chat there as well for everyone. But yeah, lots of love in the chat. Thank you again, Esther, for that. That was really, really awesome.
Of course, yeah, I'm glad and hoping I could answer some during the chat, but during the presentation. So hope I did, and let me know if you ping me on LinkedIn for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and thanks to each and every one of you for attending. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great one. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.